Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for being with us. We're going to start with our public hearings. The first is agenda item number 7, Bill 120. This is a public hearing on health and sanitation bodywork establishments, licensing amendments. This bill would amend code provisions concerning massage establishments, expand the scope of bodywork establishments to include massage establishments, require every individual performing bodywork services to be a certified massage therapist or registered massage practitioner, require compliance with all county licensing requirements as a condition of building permits, allow the revocation of use and occupancy permits for zoning and licensing violations, and generally amend the provisions for bodywork establishment. A joint HHS Public Safety Committee work session is tentatively scheduled for Tuesday, February 25th. Persons wishing to submit additional material for the council's consideration should do so before the close of business, February 19th, so that your views can be included in the material for which staff will prepare for the committee's consideration. If you would like to follow the progress of a council bill, the council website has a subscribe function. Go to the council website and use the View Council Records and Legislative Updates link to learn how. The first, the speakers for this item are Amelia Mitchell from American Massage Therapy Association of Maryland, Iris Aaronovitch, who's an individual, Jamie Bernardo, individual, Paula Jill, Maryland State Board of Massage Therapy Examiners, and Carolyn Ackerman, Amira Legal Center. If you could please join us at the table. There is, when you begin, please touch the button at the bottom of your microphone. When you finish, please cut it off. The light will come on when you green when you can to speak. When you have 30 seconds left, it will go to yellow, and when it turns red, we'll thank you very much for speaking, and we'll read the rest of your testimony if you're not finished. Did you want to speak first, Craig, or did you want? No, yeah. And so the first speaker is Amelia Mitchell, please.
Thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to speak with you all today. My name is Amelia Mitchell. I am a licensed massage therapist, testifying as the Government Relations Chair for the American Massage Therapy Association, Maryland chapter. Over 4,000 state licensed and registered massage therapists practice in Maryland, with more than 1,500 of them being members of AMTA. Licensed massage therapists are considered health care providers by the state of Maryland. AMTA supports fair and well-considered business regulations consistent with other licensed healthcare professionals and practices. Our association is deeply concerned about this bill, which would create unreasonable establishment licensing requirements with significant administrative and financial burdens. AMTA acknowledges that human trafficking is a serious and horrible epidemic worldwide. While we commend efforts to rid communities of illicit businesses operating under the guise of massage, we oppose legislation and regulations that are at the expense of legally practicing, professional, educated, licensed therapists. We encourage you to seek guidance with the Maryland Board of Massage Therapy Examiners to understand better the tiny percentage of licensed therapists in Maryland who have ever been accused or found guilty of the violations that this bill seeks to address. We simply are not the problem. However, you seek to regulate us as the solution. The bill incorrectly associates the 4,000 legal practitioners with illicit activities. Illicit businesses are best addressed through criminal code. The passage of SB 554 in 2019, which AMTA supported, clarified statewide that law enforcement can enter a suspicious business and seek to seize state licenses. We must always have them posted. Energy workers, such as Reiki and reflexology practitioners, are exempt from state licensure. However, these practices never involve the removal of clothing by the client. We would also like to note that therapeutic massage has been shown to be as effective as opioids in managing chronic pain. You've got some stuff there that I gave you. We would suggest that you would be looking for ways to welcome massage therapists into Montgomery County instead of pushing us out. The licensed therapists are not the problem here. This bill tries to create traps for illicit massage businesses who are guilty of human trafficking. That is a criminal matter. Law-abiding therapists will simply have more expense and hoops to jump through, perpetuating the problem while making it even harder for small businesses to survive in Maryland.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Next speaker is Iris Aaronovitch.
Good afternoon, esteemed member of the committee. My name is Iris Aaronovitch. I'm a professional reflexologist in the past 20 years. I have a private clinic in Rockville and am a citizen of Montgomery County. With this occupation, I'm raising my daughters. On this bill, every individual performing bodywork service need to be certified massage therapist or registered. My testimony points are that we agree that public safety is the first goal. And to combat and enforce it, we must have regulation and requirements to everybody who perform any type of complementary medicine. With this say, reflexologists have their own board of certification, the American Reflexology Certification Board, and to be certified by this organization, we required a valid psychometry exam and continuing education in required to maintain this certification every 2 years. Reflexology is independent discipline. It is not sub of massage. Reflexology is a stand-alone discipline in complementary alternative medicine. The effectiveness of reflexology is recognized worldwide by the NIH, the National Institute of Health, and the NCCIH is funding now the third time a research with Michigan State University on cancer, each of the research funded by $3 million. Gwen White, a professor in the College of Nursing, said reflexology is based on the idea that stimulating specific point of the feet. It's always been assumed like a nice comfort measure, but not to this point. This is the first step toward moving a complementary therapy from fringe care to mainstream care. So you can see this is not a massage. Public safety, reflexology is practicing on fully clothed clients who are only barefoot. Reflexologists will touch feet, hands, and outer ear only. This bill is taking our legal right to practice. I am a citizen of Montgomery County, a decent and follow the law. This is our occupation, our income. This is how we are making living. This is how we're raising our families. We are not the target of this bill. We are not breaking this law. So I'm requesting, please change this third section and separate reflexology from massage, add an amendment to this bill demanding reflexologists to submit national certification after passing the psychometry valid exam, as well as maybe possible background checks and fingerprint. So I appreciate your time and listening today, and I'm really looking to working with you on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jamie Bernardo.
Thank you, Council President Katz. Good afternoon, Council members, and thank you for the opportunity to speak against Bill 1-20. I'm Jamie Bernardo, a Maryland and DC massage therapist practicing in Montgomery County for 20 years and former 10-year instructor of an 18-month training program in Silver Spring. As a product of our public school system, University of Maryland grad, longtime business owner and community volunteer, I'm committed to helping our county be a safe and welcoming place for families, including my 2 daughters and elderly parents. As a stakeholder in this fight against human and labor trafficking, I'm deeply concerned by the intent of Bill 120 and its amendments to current Code 24.8 and 24.8b. If passed, this bill will roll back the hard work my profession and our state licensing board have accomplished over the 26 years of licensure in Maryland in distinguishing credentialed professionals like myself against illicit and trafficked workers. Required to complete 600 board-approved hours and get 24 continuing ed credits every 2 years, we must do background checks and abide by a code of ethics to maintain a license with regs that both protect and educate the public and licensed massage therapists, not masseuses, body workers operating in archaically termed massage parlors. Like my colleagues, I abhor any attempt by untrained individuals and unscrupulous companies with nefarious intentions to hijack my healthcare industry. This bill misses its mark. Instead of working with permitting services and HHS to focus on preventing illicit businesses from leasing space and promoting health techniques not regulated, you entice traffickers to open more fronts under a legit bodywork establishment moniker promoting this elusive title. Once evicted, they still return to the same shopping mall under another name. This endangers county residents seeking a place to holistically treat their healthcare conditions. Unnecessary is the irrational attempt to lump my profession into this makeshift category by penalizing modest income, sole proprietors, and independent contractors with duplicate app and licensing fees. We've already been comprehensively vetted in the third most expensive state to practice as healthcare providers. All of this gives sound reason why we're listed in the current code as exempt from redundant county oversight. And frankly, the optics simply point to a money grab. This bill only serves to further blur the lines between professional massage therapy practices and illicit businesses that abuse spa permits or don't bother to apply for licenses. More resources should be dedicated to NCP's 8-member Vice and Intelligence Unit, applying existing criminal code, and an inspect verify ordinance like other counties, or a title protection law to prosecute and permanently shut down these crime enterprises, allowing lawful massage practices to operate with integrity and dignity. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Paula Jill.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Paula Jill. I am the chair for the State Board of Massage Therapy Examiners. First, the board would like to commend the County Council for its willingness to tackle the issue of non-licensed individuals giving massage. And we would also like to thank the council for reaching out to the board for consultation regarding Bill 1-20. The board has reviewed the bill and is offering the following broad stroke comments. General comments. Maryland statute has 2 tiers, licensed massage therapist and registered massage practitioners. There are no certified massage therapists under Maryland statute. Throughout the document, the words massage and bodywork have been used interchangeably. These are separate and distinct. The following comments are under 24(8)(b). A, bodywork definition, as currently written in the bill, addresses energy work. Bodywork has many more modalities. If the intent is to include bodywork, the definition needs changes for the board to support it. Under A2, the sexual activity definition. If other healthcare professions have this definitions in their laws and ordinance, the board would support it. If not, having massage separated out, the board would be unwilling to support it. As a healthcare profession, it does not belong in this bill. That belongs in criminal code. Under B1, exemptions. The bill states exemptions for those who are supervised by licensed physicians. There's no requirement in the statute stating LMTs or RMPs must be supervised by a licensed physician. Therefore, this bill would include all LMTs and RMPs. Under C10, body workers and massage therapists having licenses from the board. Under our statute 6-101F1 currently only defines massage therapy. Therefore, our board only licenses individuals who are massage therapists. Under letter D, submission of proof of good health. Again, if this is something that is in all other healthcare requirements, then our board would consider it. Otherwise, this belongs in criminal code. The board would be happy to work with the council in amending the current laws to better ensure protection of the public in Montgomery County. And in conclusion, the State Board of Massage Therapy Examiners is unable to support this bill as currently written.
Thank you very much. Next speaker is Carolyn Ackerman.
Afternoon. My name is Caroline Ackerman, and I'm the Maryland staff attorney for the Amara Legal Center. The Amara Legal Center is a nonprofit that provides free legal services to survivors of sex trafficking and to sex workers. While Amara commends the council for taking steps to address human trafficking, we have several concerns about the bill, and we are opposing it today. The first concern is that there is no evidence to support the idea that licensing Body Works employees will result in identifying more traffickers or reducing trafficking activities. In fact, Body Works establishments are already licensed by the Department of Health and Human Services and are not regularly being inspected because of a lack of personnel. Requiring additional licenses will not eliminate the problem that there are too few people to monitor these establishments. Moreover, even if inspections of licenses did occur, there is no data to show that this would be an effective way of identifying survivors or traffickers. What we do know about the bill is that it is costly. Individuals seeking to practice Body Works will be required to obtain massage licenses, even if they do not practice massage. Massage licenses require multiple fees and at least 600 hours of coursework, with tuition costing as much as $12,000. Amara does not believe that we should impose this burden on individuals practicing legitimate Body Works without clear evidence that it will reduce trafficking activities. In particular, Body Works is one of the industries that survivors seek employment after leaving trafficking situations. We do not wish to add any additional barriers to survivors seeking gainful employment. The second concern is the bill's lack of Fourth Amendment protections. The bill would enable police to enter a Body Works establishment at any time it is occupied. This unlimited right of entry is unnecessary because, one, law enforcement can already obtain a search warrant to enter an establishment if there is probable cause that a crime is being committed, and two, allowing law enforcement to enter at any time could result in survivors of trafficking being arrested and prosecuted. Traffickers are not constantly present on site when their victims are engaging in commercial sex or forced labor. Survivors often do not self-identify when first confronted by police, and as a result, they are frequently arrested and charged with crimes. Arresting survivors within Body Works establishments would defeat the purpose of the bill to reduce trafficking and support survivors. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Councilmember Rice.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. President. I really want to thank folks for testifying today. We also have a letter that's from our Human Trafficking Prevention Committee that highlights some of the amendments that we need to move forward in. I want to start with Ms. Aaronovitch because and it's Aaronovitch, correct? Yes, I really want to thank you for meeting with my staff as well as identifying some of the key points. One of the things for folks who may be watching at home as well as folks in the audience, reflexology actually has its own certification, and we do agree that that's one of the amendments that we need to put forward, recognizing again that there are people who, despite Amara's assertion that folks are not going to do this or that it's costly or prohibitive, the reality is that folks do it now, and they're doing a great job. And you know, the interesting thing is that my wife, who's a cosmetologist, who had to go to school, who did it when she was 18, the daughter of a single mother who raised two other daughters. She did it, and she did it because she knew that it would make her successful, it would give her great opportunities, who now owns her own salon in downtown Bethesda. This is a potential that's there, and I do think, again, that we don't want to lose sight of the fact that this is not solely just about human trafficking. This is about public safety and making sure that the people who are providing services to the people in Montgomery County are licensed and regulated. So thank you, Ms. Aaronovitch, for your recommendations. I did want to address Mr. Bernardo because you said something that that we would be placing duplicate application and licensing fees upon massage therapists. The bill doesn't do any of that. All it's doing is asking that you currently hold a license. Were you aware of that?
You're going to need to touch your microphone, please.
Based on what I read from the bill, it talked about taking away exemptions for us. And the exemptions to me were of what the bill's intent was to actually make sure that people were licensed, and people had to go through permitting and application fees in order to get licensed. And there were pre-inspections for that license that were going to be carried out by Health and Human Services. So enlighten me if I'm incorrect in that.
It doesn't
Yeah.
affect anyone who's actually got a legal license. Anybody who's a practitioner, if you are opening up your own and you're an individual practitioner, so you're not working for another company, there's not a layer of additional charges nor applications. It's the standard. What we wanted to do is make sure that people who were operating illegally without that type of licensure didn't have it. And so I just wanted you to be aware so that you know anyone who has a legal license is not affected by this. Anyone who's already legitimate, and we'll work with staff when we go through our work sessions to make sure that you understand what's in the bill and what it entails, so that you can have that information.
If I can respond,
Please.
Councilman Rice, I think I was, as I was thinking about it, we were really looking at the establishment license that you had purported in the bill, and that because massage therapists were going to be lumped into body workers, and that you required bodywork establishments licenses or permits, that was what we were looking at in addition, in terms of additional permitting by the county on top of state licensing.
No, it's a use and occupancy license, and so that's standard with any business that opens up. They have to file for a use and occupancy license. That's actually the licensure that we're looking for, that would be affected and be taken away if in fact you are operating illegally. So again, we can address this in the work session. I did just want to again thank all of the folks who testified, because I think again it's really important for us to get at the crux of what this issue is truly about, and it is twofold. It is about making sure that we don't have illegal operations, and while they may be very few and far between, and certainly I don't want people to think personally that we're attacking massage institutions. My wife used to work for one that gave massages as well as other cosmetology services. That's not what our objective is. What our objective is to make sure we're also protecting the public, because there are, unfortunately, folks that are operating illegally, and we need to make sure that we're shutting them down if, in fact, they are operating in our community. And that's one of the things that we have a duty as the Board of Public Health to make sure that we're protecting our citizens. So thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councilmember Glass.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank you all for your testimony. I think you all complimented each other in the thoughts that you provided, giving us a deeper tapestry of how you view this legislation. My question, I'll direct it to Ms. Jelanis, but if anyone else has any thoughts. While we're talking about reflexology, we're talking about massage, we're talking about terms and definitions, which some of you have already said need further clarification. Are there any other types of Eastern type medicine or alternative type medicine which hasn't been discussed but that might be captured within this legislation?
There are ones that could be captured. Rather than going into all of that now, I'd be happy to have a conversation.
Answer is yes, and I
The
look
answer
forward
is
to
yes.
continuing that
Yes.
conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and that concludes this panel. Thank you very much. The next public hearing is a resolution to adopt the changes to 24.8B in Bill 120, Health and Sanitation, Bodywork Establishments Licensing Amendments as a Board of Health Regulation. A joint HHS Public Safety Committee work session is tentatively scheduled for Tuesday, February 25th, and you can follow the material just as you did for the other one, and there are no speakers for this public hearing. The final public hearing that we have today is Item 5B. The council will receive testimony on the Germantown plan for the town sector plan, a comprehensive amendments to portions of the approved and adopted 1989 Germantown master plan as amended in 1985 Boyd's master plan as amended, in 1994 Clarksburg master plan as amended in 2009 Germantown employment area sector plan as amended. It also amends the general plan on wedges and corridors for the physical development of the Maryland-Washington Regional District in Montgomery and Prince George's counties as amended. The plan recommends appropriate zoning and ways protecting the community's open space and recreation areas while maintaining the predominantly residential character of Churchill Village. The plan boundary consists of approximately 1,429 acres of developed land, including the lakes, and is roughly bounded by Little Seneca Lake to the northwest, Crystal Rock Drive to the northeast, Lockberry Drive to the southeast, and Father Hurley Boulevard and the CSX railroad tracks to the south. Recommendations are provided for land use, density, and zoning for privately and publicly owned land. A Fed committee work session is tentatively scheduled for Tuesday, February 25th. Persons wishing to submit additional material for the council's consideration should do so before the close of business February 5th so that your views can be included in the material which staff will prepare for the committee's consideration. The first speakers for the first panel are Marilyn Balcom, Robert Nelsen, Robert Harris, and Carmen Nazario Vega. Marilyn Balcom is with Gaithersburg Germantown Chamber of Commerce. The other three are testifying as individuals. And I see,
I don't know if I inadvertently was not.
You were
signed up.
not, but please, if you would like to identify yourself for the record, and we will allow you to speak first.
I'll make it quick because you just heard the overview. I'm Casey Anderson, Chair of the Planning Board. This plan, as you heard this morning, makes very modest changes to some of the land use recommendations in this neighborhood. We've heard a little bit late in the process from one property owner, and we look forward to discussing with them the potential for expansion of their senior living facility. But other than that, I think we'll just defer our other comments until we get to Fed.
Thank you very much. The first speaker will be, the second speaker, excuse me, will be Marilyn Balcom.
Good afternoon, Council President Katz, members of the County Council. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on the Germantown Town Sector Plan. My name is Marilyn Balcom, and I'm the president of the Gaithersburg Germantown Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber's been actively engaged in the development of Germantown for over 30 years, and we are committed to Germantown reaching its full potential with a good balance of residential, retail, and jobs as outlined in the 2009 sector plan. We continue to need your help to make sure that that plan is implemented. We understand that the primary purpose of this update is to replace the existing town sector zoning with current zoning classifications for the Churchill Village community of Germantown. The majority of these changes recommended seem to be technical updates to the zoning and not substantive changes to the allowable uses and density of the properties. The Germantown Chamber supports this plan. I do have just a couple comments on the implementation recommendations. While we're not opposed to adding modest amounts of retail in this sector, we do question the retail trend study that concludes that there's an unmet retail demand in Germantown. Many of our retail and restaurant businesses in the Germantown Town Center have closed. Some have reopened, which is exciting. But the concern is that there's a benefit to having local neighborhood service retail, but there is a risk of competing against the Germantown Town Center. So in implementation of the plan, we just want to protect that Germantown, the core center there. As for commercial zoning of the north side of Wisteria, Craig might be the only, Councilmember Rice might be the only person who will know what I'm talking about, but allowing future conversion of the commercial condominium development to residential units provides flexibility for this property, but the caveat would be that these are older style commercial offices and they provide affordable commercial space. And if and when that conversion takes place, we will have some affordable commercial spaces eliminated and will come back to you for a request for help when those tenants, when those places convert. So other than that, we do support this, and we look forward to continuing to work with you to bring jobs to Germantown. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Robert Nelsen.
Thank you, President Katz and County Council members. I'm Robert Nelsen, resident of Goshen and former chair of the Up-County Citizens Advisory Board. 15 years ago, I moved from Potomac to the Up-County with the expectations of more convenient amenities, less traffic congestion, and more affordable housing. My home is only 4 miles from Germantown's Milestone, where there are numerous department stores, grocery stores, and shops. And I consider Milestone to be Germantown's de facto town center, as many more people daily visit this commercial area on the east side of I-270 than on the west side. The government had promised the Corridor Cities Transitway to extend the reach of Metro Rail to Clarksburg, had promised the completion of the Mid-County Highway, and had promised improvements to Goshen Road, which were all factors that I considered in making the move to the Up-County. 15 years later, the promised infrastructure has not been provided, yet development has continued unabated. Quoting from the Planning Department report, the 1974 master plan for Germantown recommended that Germantown develop into a new community, similar to towns such as Reston and Columbia. Well, if you visit Columbia today, there are high-rise commercial office buildings currently being constructed at a rapid pace. The mall is a beehive of activity, and high-quality restaurants abound. Here in Germantown, along the so-called I-270 technology corridor, commercial building sites have high vacancies or being replaced by residential apartments, and we also have a golf driving range. The county executive claims he's working hard to improve the quality of life for all people in Montgomery County, but when we in the Up-County see massive traffic jams, inadequate public transportation, burgeoning schools, dismal property value appreciation, and even more dense development, we feel that the quality of life is declining, not improving. Is this equity? Is this justice? You know, Albert Einstein once said the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. Since the piecemeal planning process, such as what we are discussing here today, has resulted in such drastically poor results, I recommend that the planning process take a timeout. Let's take a timeout until we see promised infrastructure actually being built. Let's take a timeout until we actually see schools being built to accommodate the demand. Let's take a timeout until we see a permanent District 6 police station being built and ample personnel assigned to deal with the crime situation. Let's take a timeout until we see more frequent service on the MARC rail. Expensive monorails and bus rapid transit will do very little to solve the transportation problems for over 1/3 of county residents residing in 1/2 of the land area of the county. Let's take a timeout until the 5.6-mile gap in the Mid-County Highway is built on the master plan route. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Robert Harris.
Good afternoon, Mr. President, members of the council. For the record, I'm Bob Harris of Lurch Early Brewer, testifying on behalf of the Episcopal Diocese of Washington. The diocese owns a vacant 4.8-acre property at the corner of Father Hurley Boulevard and Waters Landing Drive. I'm here on their behalf to support the proposed master plan recommendation for that property. The property was originally to be the site of either senior housing or a church. Over the years, however, a senior housing project was built on the adjoining property, and the church has no need for the site for church purposes. The current town sector zoning allows townhome and multifamily development, but other provisions of that zone have prevented such development from proceeding. The diocese supports the master plan because it would enable those uses to proceed. We agree with the planning board draft that the most appropriate use for the property remains residential, either in the form of townhomes or multifamily, with the possibility of a small amount of retail. Such uses would be completely compatible with the surrounding uses. Equally important, this would serve the important housing role that Germantown has played in the region, particularly for middle-income and working families. As reflected in the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments report back in September and the County Council's adoption of that report, it is critical that Montgomery County use resources like this site to accommodate the thousands of new homes required to meet Montgomery County's projections over the next 10 years. The Planning Board draft provides a clear justification for residential use of this property with the possibility of a small amount of retail. By allowing residential development to proceed, the plan lifts the artificial barrier that has prevented such development until now and provides the best opportunity for an economically viable residential use of this long vacant property. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. The next speaker was Carmen Nazario Vega. Is Carmen Nazario Vega here? And Councilmember Rice, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And since I wasn't able to attend this morning, I just wanted to express my support for this plan and really thanks folks for testifying. It's interesting as Germantown creates a new opportunity for us to go and really explore what expansion in Montgomery County will look like, especially when it comes to some of our areas that have not had the support necessary. And so to you, Ms. Balcom, I really want to thank you for your vision when it comes to what's next. I remember first moving to Germantown before town center was built. And seeing and having expectations, the promise of a Kentlands-esque kind of town center, and not really getting that, and understanding that we have to do more when it comes to supporting economic development as well as housing in the area, understanding that housing continues to be increasingly inaffordable for folks. When my wife and I moved to Germantown, we bought an affordable condo townhome right on Middlebrook Road, right across from the McDonald's. And now those townhomes have doubled and almost tripled in price in terms of what my wife and I bought just 15 years ago. And it's staggering to imagine that young families continue to try and move into Montgomery County when we talk about our missing middle, but when we talk about our lower middle, that's where folks are when families first want to start out and they're not able to afford it. Thank you, Mr. Nelsen, for addressing the transportation woes that we continue to have when it comes to the lack of MARC service, as well as the lack of M83, master plan highway extension that was promised to the Germantown residents. I would just say, let's not hold our residents hostage for lack of action. What we need to do is continue to push for the county government to continue to deliver on its promise. And we've started to make some of those strides when it came to the Clarksburg Fire Station, when it's coming to the Clarksburg Library and other amenities that are there. And we are making strides when it comes to economic development as well, although I know I'm going to hear from one of my good friends, former supporter, about the polls at Topgolf. I will say that my daughter, who's employed there, is one of the 500 jobs that came to the Germantown area as a result of Topgolf. And a large portion of those jobs are students, especially from Seneca Valley High School in Northwest. Those are things that are game changers for us, something that we haven't seen in a very long time when it comes to Germantown. And I think with continued investment and support, as well as this county's support when it comes to the transit woes that we continue to face, Germantown can be the place that it was truly planned to be. So thank you for your testimony, guys.
Thank you, this panel is complete. And the next panel is Darka Bodnurik, an individual, Margaret Shope from Tame Coalition, Jason George, an individual, and Joseph Perico, an individual. Darka Bodnurik? No? Margaret Shope.
Good afternoon, Council. My name is Margaret Shope, and I represent the Coalition for Transit Alternatives to Mid-County Highway Extended. The TAME Coalition supports increasing the role of transit in the Germantown plan for the town sector zone. This draft plan for the town sector zone has a connectivity section stating the following. Ride-on Bus services the community with 3 bus routes with connecting service to the Germantown Transit Center. This is a key element that needs to be elevated in this plan. In the last 5 years, there have been 3 reports and hundreds of hours spent on dealing with transit that I want to bring to your attention. In 2013, we had the county-wide transit corridors plan that states, for transit to truly succeed and to achieve the desired ridership, it must have an extensive network and dedicated lanes. At the heart of this plan is the recommendation to create dedicated lanes to bus transit. Only a system that is primarily characterized by dedicated lanes can deliver on the promise of rapid, in the word rapid transit. In 2015, the Coalition for Smarter Growth addressed the analysis that was completed by Maryland's State Highway Administration for the 355 North Bus Rapid Transit Study, where most Clarksburg residents commute to Germantown Gaithersburg and Rockville, Flint Hills, that's where I'm from, in Kansas, White Flint, and Bethesda. More residents who commute from Clarksburg to Germantown and point south will take transit, if it's reliable and if it's rapid. And finally, in 2017, the council passed an emergency climate mobilization resolution that committed to reaching carbon zero by 2035. This Germantown plan for town sector draft shows carbon emissions increasing. This is going in the wrong direction, and it is unacceptable. One big way to reduce carbon emissions from transportation is to provide dedicated bus lanes, reliable connecting buses to Germantown. And lastly, to give you our mission statement again, we support canceling the Mid-County Highway from the Master Plan of Highways. And like other highway projects, it is a costly
Thank you very much. We will read the
buster.
rest of your testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Jason George. Right, you had it the first time. There you
Okay.
go.
I'd like to thank the council for letting me testify today. I grew up in Germantown. My parents have lived there for nearly 40 years. I just moved away and bought a place in DeCoverly. There's a lot of concern, and I would actually say anger in the community about some of the development that has taken place recently adjacent to the Churchill Village town sector, specifically Topgolf, but also along Century Boulevard north of there, there's just block after block of apartment building. And so my concern specifically with what's proposed in the Germantown Churchill Village town sector is that commercial mixed residential development on the corner of Father Hurley and Wires Landing Drive. The infrastructure, because this hasn't hit yet even. It hasn't hit our roads, it hasn't hit our schools yet. I don't believe people have moved into those buildings. And I'm very curious to find, because I believe I've heard going back 20, 30 years that county estimates always get it wrong, how many under 18s, how many people will be using the public schools in this region of the county. What's the effect on Wires Landing Elementary, Lake Seneca Elementary, Martin Luther King Middle, for all of these things? What's the effect on our roads? I'm seeing with some of this construction a lot more traffic, industrial traffic for the building on Crystal Rock Drive, and I am terrified to think of what effect that will have on Father Hurley and Wires Landing Drive if that 4.8 acre site is developed. It is right now forested. In the past, it's been talked about potentially for a church, and I guess I found out in the last panel why that never happened. And if it's a senior center, I guess that's fine. But this all, there have been trees cut down to develop some of this stuff on the northern part of this stuff adjacent just to the east of the Churchill Town sector. Why not just leave this as green space, undeveloped? It is, this county is committed to the tree canopy. In this area, the tree canopy has been diminished because of some of this development, and we need a carbon sink around 270 to capture that carbon. This is part of our infrastructure, our green infrastructure in this part of the county, and we don't want to be Silver Spring or Bethesda where we don't have these thick forests or nice running trails that are so easily acceptable to pretty much everybody who lives in that area. So I'm thankful it's emphasizing this low density development. Let's not change the character of that, because surrounding this space, there's low density
Thank you very
development.
much, and we'll read the rest of your testimony. Joseph Perico.
Good afternoon, Mr. President, members of the County Council. My name is Joe Perico, and I'm the owner of Churchill Senior Living Community located at 21,000 Father Hurley Boulevard in Germantown. The property contains approximately 5.5 acres and is located on the west side of Father Hurley Boulevard near the intersection of Father Hurley Boulevard and Waters Landing Drive. The Planning Board draft identifies the property as map number 18 in the Northwest District of the Sector Plan. My company purchased the property in 1994 with the intention of building affordable senior apartments to address the increased need for affordable senior housing within Montgomery County. The property was approved pursuant to the development plan for Churchill Town Sector for the phased development of up to 300 senior housing units, including independent and assisted living units. The development plan does not limit the density by gross floor area or the floor area ratio. Since 2001, we have operated a well-established senior living community that provides housing opportunities to seniors of diverse socioeconomic backgrounds. The existing buildings, built in 2 phases, provide 255 independent senior living units, including 242 units which are affordable, along with extensive common area space. The units include MPDUs and more deeply affordable units which are required to qualify for low-income housing tax credit financing, which was used in the development of the community. To meet the growing need for affordable senior housing in the county, we would like a zoning recommendation for the property that will allow construction of an additional 200 independent living units, which will include 121 additional affordable units, along with 140 assisted living units, and a critical care facility that will serve the residents of Churchill Senior Living and the surrounding community. As with the first 2 phases of the community, the independent living units would include MPDUs as well as units with lower income restrictions than the currently MPDU regimen in Montgomery County to qualify for the low-income housing tax credit financing. Unfortunately, the Planning Board's draft of the sector plan does not recommend adequate density or height on the property to achieve this vision. The Planning Board draft recommends commercial residential neighborhood factor of 1.25, a commercial factor of 0.25, residential factor of 1.25, and a height factor of 45 zoning for the property. Taking into account existing development, this zoning would not allow any significant number of independent or assisted living units to be constructed in an economically viable manner. Accordingly, we respectfully request that the recommended zoning be modified to a CRN of 2.5, a commercial rating of 0.25.
Thank you very much. We'll read the rest of your testimony.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And there are no questions of this panel, so thank you very much to the panel. And this concludes our public hearings today. We're now going to go into a work session for Forest Glen / Montgomery Hills Sector Plan, and that's under District Council session. Councilmember Rice.
Thank you very much, Council President. Unfortunately, I was attending a meeting this morning with our county executive and could not attend the session, but I'd like to be recorded in the affirmative for the consent calendar as well as for our vote on the impending bills.
Okay, thank you very much. So
Thank you, sir.
noted. Are you going to lead it off? Councilmember Reamer, please.
Thank you, Council President Cindy Katz. And I'll say as Mr. Perico exits that planning staff is talking to him to follow up on those questions, and hope we'll have a
If I could ask everyone who's in the room to please leave, we can actually hear you. Thank you.
so when we get to committee, we will have the benefit of their reflection on that. All right, now we are going to return to the Forest Glen sector plan.
Where are we picking up from where we left off?
I think I brought my packet upstairs. I'm trying to find
Well, we're
it.
not going up there to have the meeting. So.
Looking for it now. I'm having trouble recognizing.
Do you know, Pam, where we left off?
Yes, good afternoon. We left off on page 12.
Page 12.
It'll get better.
All right. Thank you so much.
For those of you who could not
Is
hear
this
Pam, she said page 12.
5C, Pam? Packet 5C?
Yes.
Okay.
Actually, it's number 8A is agenda item.
8, okay.
Did it change for today? I'm sorry. I brought my one from last
No.
time.
We understand your plan hurt. We appreciate it.
We're starting at the Montgomery Hills District section, if that helps.
I'm sorry, Pam, let's just all get oriented here. Are we in packet 5C? I brought my packets upstairs for the break, and then I forgot to bring them back downstairs. So I'm waiting for my staff to bring them to me. And,
Oh, they got it.
thank you, Marlene.
Page 12.
Okay, 5C, page 12.
Yeah.
See, page 12. I guess this is not. Yep, thank you. Okay, so we are working our way through this document, and we are now at the Montgomery Hills District. And I will turn it back to you, Pam,
Yeah.
and we'll,
Good.
you'll do as best you can.
I will. As we go through the Montgomery Hills District, you'll notice most of these properties are commercial. The first one we're going to deal with is the Seminary Place Shopping Center. This also includes the Shell gas station and the Montgomery Hills Car Wash, so it's taken as a group. The Seminary Place Shopping Center itself actually occupies 2 properties there. You'll notice on page 12 is the zoning recommendation for these properties. All 4 properties are being recommended for the same zone so that there's the potential for some synergistic redevelopment that could kickstart development in this area, and they may all redevelop together. The recommendation for the new zoning is a CRT zone of 2.25 total FAR. The commercial and residential also equal the total FAR for complete flexibility, and it's recommended at a height of 75 feet. In talking about this and recognizing there were going to be other retail properties that were going to be under discussion in this plan, the committee had a conversation about, while seeing the value of having flexibility in zoning, so to allow the residential to equal total FAR and the commercial FAR to equal total FAR, to have language in the plan that recognizes the importance for retail in this area is very important. And so there was a committee recommendation that language be added to the plan regarding the importance of retaining small business and community serving retail that would apply to commercial properties under redevelopment. So I just wanted to note that for the committee, that there'll be language that recognizes that while there's complete flexibility, something could develop with a lot of residential in this area. The plan will recommend that under review at the planning board, it is looked at for the value of its retail benefit to the community.
Okay, now, we don't really know what that will mean, but maybe the planning board can turn, can work with property owners. We can't make anyone do retail if they don't want to do retail. They can have empty space if that's what we want to insist upon, but we're recognizing the value of the retail sector there, and the vision here is to create neighborhood serving retail. So hopefully this will all fit together. Thank you.
And the committee unanimously supported the planning board's recommendation for zoning. There's a parks recommendation for a half acre to 1 acre park on this site, and that was also supported unanimously by the committee for a civic green urban park. So the next property, the committee didn't have any problems with the recommendations in the planning board draft for the Seminary Place Shopping Center. The next shopping center is the Montgomery Hills Shopping Center. It was built over 90 years ago. It's one of the oldest commercial shopping centers in the area.
So this is the one that when you're driving north on Georgia Avenue, it has the Tudor design elements, right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it has the Tudor designs. And the plan had recommended reconfirming its existing zoning. And so in looking at that and discussing it with the committee, it was thought that it would be nice to have the same flexibility to allow the total density to equal commercial density and residential density, because you'll have the language in the plan to protect the retail, but it allows for more flexibility and redevelopment, that somebody could actually achieve total density in some fashion that's more flexible. And it also provides a little increase in height from 45 feet to 60 feet. If there's any questions on that.
Okay, so, 60 feet, density allocations.
Okay. Now we move on to Snyder's and the volunteer fire station and parking lot 12. You probably received testimony or written correspondence from the owners of the Snyder Superfoods who were requesting additional density on their site. the proposed draft gave them a CRT zone of 1.5, where commercial and residential were both 1.5 and a height of 60 feet. And Mr. Snyder came in and sent testimony requesting CRT zone of 2.25 FAR with commercial and residential both equal to 2.25 and a height of 75 feet. The site is constrained. It's not a huge site, and there is a WMATA easement that runs underneath the property on the left-hand side of it, the eastern portion of the development. And as many people noted, when you bring up the Montgomery Hills plan to almost anyone, the first thing they'll say is, I'm okay with almost any change as long as you don't get rid of Snyder's. We can't really make a business stay in business.
We can't make a business stay in business. We should probably put that on the cover page of this plan.
But the committee recognized the strong community value of this family-run grocery store. And so the decision from the committee was to increase the density per the request of Mr. Snyder to 2.25, but did limit the height to 60 feet. The neighboring fire station property is going to be at 60 feet. And as you just reviewed, the Montgomery Hills Shopping Center to the east of this property is limited to 60 feet. And so it made sense to keep all three properties in a row limited to 60 feet. And Snyder's does sit slightly higher in elevation than the Montgomery Hills Shopping Center beside it by about 10 feet.
And we also learned from Gwen that the density that we were allowing, they couldn't use it all even at 60 feet, likely. So going to 70 feet wouldn't really help much. They've got more than they can use at 60 feet. Is that the right way to say it, Gwen?
Yes, that 60 feet of height can accommodate the density that you're approving at 2.25. In fact, it more than accommodates that density.
Right.
For the fire station, there is a change in zoning. It's mixed use. So sorry. And there was a recommendation by the committee to double check with the fire station that they were okay with the change.
Yeah.
And they are. We contacted them, and they are fine with the mixed-use zoning change. They don't have a problem with it.
All right. And then I'll try for you, Pam. So parks and open space on the fire station, is that the parks and open spaces referring to the fire station?
And the Snyders together.
And the Snyders together. There was a recommendation for kind of a pocket park. We did not include that specific recommendation, but rather a more flexible design. You know, we know that the planning board will take we'll take this all up together, and they'll come up with the best design, but we're not trying to impose any specific requirement. Okay, then turning next to parking lot number 12. So this is the parking lot that, you know, if you're on Georgia going north, you turn left on Seminary, it's on your left side. That we, you know, had a lot of discussion about. We went with zoning for housing, and Councilmember Jawando had recommended a specific zoning formula that we embraced. The upshot of it is, you know, we would get maybe 35 units. Oh, well, Councilmember Jawando is volunteering to explain, and maybe I'll take him up on that. 15% MPDU, another 15% additional affordable at less, you know, 50% AMI or less, is there anything you wanted to add? I mean, we're gonna do a lot of properties, so I probably won't turn it back to you for each property where
this
we.
is fine. Just at the top, and I'll say it
Sure,
once, and I think
fine.
that'd be good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the committee, and again, we'll do our part up here to help Pam not have to say much. So this wrote a letter that included several properties. This was the first one that we all have a belief that public property, we need to maximize the usage so that we can get the maximum level of affordability. And this is obviously one of those. And so the additional zoning going to CRT 1.5 and in height of 60 feet would allow another 11 units. But within that, realizing that we need deeper levels of affordability across the AMI schedule, and so that requiring 30% of the usage to be for MPDUs at 15% at the traditional 65% of area median income, and then the other 15% at 50% or below of median income. And that, you see this same zoning change throughout a couple of different spots coming up, and thankfully the committee agreed. I think on one of them we actually went a little further later on and allowed for even more housing. So just wanted to thank my colleagues and the chairman for letting me explain that.
Absolutely. And you know, this was a difference from the draft that we received. There was a recommendation for a park at this site, but we felt, given the recommendation that we were making on a nearby property, which is a very large piece of property we're recommending for a park, we felt like it would be appropriate to use this public land for housing. And we also, I would note, just for those, you know, as you, an important element of this area, this community, is there is a large homeless encampment at 16th Street. I don't know if it's large, but there is a homeless encampment. And if the county were to develop, for example, parking lot 12 with a nonprofit, you know, partner, you could envision homeless services or permanent supportive housing, for example, as being something that might be an organization would gain access to some of those MPDUs. But generally speaking, I just wanted to say I think we all felt like it was important that this plan recognize the, you know, the county residents who live there in the wooded area, and they are receiving services from Progress Place generally, and we wanted to acknowledge them and their residency and say that we would hope and we would expect that the county, in its partnerships around redevelopment, would seek to provide housing for formerly homeless people in how we in any of the partnerships that we might form to develop public land. So that was just a note. So that's that recommendation for parking lot 12. The next is across the block, across the street. There's a string of commercial properties. Georgia Avenue East, it's called. This is from, you know, the edge, the property where the meditation museum is.
Flora Lane.
What's the name of the lane?
Flora
Lane, all the way back to
Columbia Boulevard.
Columbia Boulevard. And generally speaking, we recommended, is it the same zoning as what had been recommended in the plan?
It's slightly different.
Okay.
The zoning in the plan was done to make sure that some current non-conforming structures had enough zoning, so
Right.
some were reconfirmed in their zoning, and some had additional zoning. The committee looked at it, and for each block, and there's 2 main blocks there, within each block, the zoning has been made to be consistent. Could also encourage redevelopment, or at least support redevelopment. No height was given. These are very close to single-family homes, so there's no increase in height, but it just made consistent zoning across the 2 blocks.
And we did acknowledge the role of the parking lot that's adjacent to those businesses. We just wanted to make sure that those who are watching didn't come out of the plan thinking that the county was trying to get rid of every parking lot in Montgomery Hills. That is,
And so
that
the
would be a big concern. These
Right.
parking lots are needed and they're used.
And this parking lot in particular, we did not change the zoning on it. It remained
Right.
at its current zoning.
So there is that recommendation, and then that's on page 17. So continuing to page 18, 19.
19.
The Woodside District.
Well, right before that,
Okay.
there's a handful of commercial properties that are right below Columbia Boulevard as it crosses Georgia Avenue there. And the plan had recommended reconfirming its zoning. But again, zoning that's there today was based on a translation of C1 zoning. And so the committee just made a minor change to make the zoning flexible and to say we're not going to increase total density, but let's allow commercial and residential to equal total, and to leave the height at 45 feet. And there's a map just at the top of 19 to show you that.
I would ask our able planners to take the lead on the packet, but you wrote the packet, and I think the structure of it is sort of in your head, and it might not be easy to just jump in and
I'm okay if you
follow that flow. So,
Yeah.
Woodside, okay, so we're confirming existing zoning there. Moving on to the Woodside District, the first is the properties that are on Georgia Avenue at Luzerne and Cedar View Court. And maybe I'll ask planning staff, because I think we were agreeing with their recommendations here. This was where we were envisioning potentially density to support missing middle. And these are presently empty lots, I think, or parking. There's just parking.
I think they're vacant.
And vacant.
Yeah, these are vacant lots, and we think there's a real opportunity here to create a gateway into downtown Silver Spring to the south and the Montgomery Hills neighborhood to the north by creating some potential missing middle housing on this site. The zoning, I think, would allow for up to 22 units, and we would really be very interested in seeing that as a mix of housing types, not necessarily just 22 townhouses, something that actually was a little more creative.
All right. So we'll hope that that's a possibility. It might be something where we could do something very interesting. All right. So moving on to what was probably the one of the 2 or 3 bigger discussion points of the plan, which is the right-of-way at 16th and Georgia. This is a large, presently owned by SHA piece of land. And as part of the transportation recommendations, the plan recommends that we get rid of the right turn that you presently make if you're going south on Georgia, heading towards that side of Silver Spring or into DC. We're getting rid of that, and then the proposal is to combine that road right away with this forested or vegetated area and build a park. And planning has been looking at this and recommending this would be a terrific place not only to meet the State Highway Administration's need for some stormwater infrastructure remediation for Georgia Avenue, but potentially adding some active recreational uses and very specifically a soccer field. So Chair Anderson would like to invite you to make some comments on this one.
Thank you. We have a well-documented need for more rectangles in the down county in general. I can attest to this personally because I live about 4 blocks from this site, and I can tell you that my kids in playing soccer have wound up practicing at Hillendale or practicing at Rays Meadow, miles away from home, and that's a problem for kids who need to be home after school and parents who are trying to get them to and from practice. I certainly agree that housing is the #1 priority, but it's not the only priority. And this plan, both the Planning Board and then the Fed Committee even more so, have tried to look for opportunities to put as much housing as possible, particularly on the publicly owned sites. And in fact, the Fed Committee dialed back some of the parks recommendations on some of the other properties that you've already discussed. We feel strongly that in light of that set of decisions, in addition to the fact that we have such a well-documented need for more athletic fields, and we're asking for more money from the council as part of the parks capital as well as operating budget to maintain them and get them to a higher level of playability and increase capacity, that this is a rare opportunity to get a full-size athletic field in the down county, one that will probably not present itself again because the size of the parcel in an already intensively developed area just doesn't happen in every plan or happen every day. The other thing I would add about this is if the property were upzoned with the idea of developing with housing, SHA would have to market the property at fair market value. I've been talking to Greg Slater about this property. They are prepared to negotiate a trade for us for other property that we own, which is done routinely with the Parks Department. So we can get this at no cost to the county, no cash from the county to acquire this property for a park. We could not acquire it as the Parks Department for future housing, and the price that somebody would have to pay, whether it was a private buyer or the county, in order to develop this for affordable or market rate housing would be probably a multiple of the fair market value of what it is zoned as single-family detached, which allows us to negotiate a very favorable trade to not have to give up much to get the park basically for free. So I hope you'll all find that persuasive. I feel strongly that this is a central recommendation of the plan. It's certainly the most important park recommendation, and I think that it, as I say, is an opportunity we shouldn't pass up.
Okay, so great. We'll I'd like to make some comments, and then we'll thank you, Mr. President. So this was a difficult one for me because what we're seeing from communities around the country that have been successful in altering the trajectory of their housing market is that they really use public land to the maximum benefit, and they make housing a priority for public land. However, I understand that we also have a need for rectangles and rectangular fields, and I've been working hard with the planning board to increase our investment in that. And given that also the way that the planning process unfolded, I think this was something that was discussed at a very early stage in the process, and so given that we have pushed pretty, I think, assertively around other public parcels in this plan, I was supportive of reserving this for a athletic field and other park facilities. I did have one concern, though, that I want to circle back to, which is that we've often seen over the years that when you propose a soccer field, you get a lot of pushback, and people will say, wait a second, we don't want that here. We've got woodland just over the street, just a couple blocks away. We don't need another soccer field. Can we just have some passive recreational space? Can we just have, some other features that are less intensive? And that I would be uncomfortable with. I feel like the opportunity here is to build a recreation, an athletic field that is needed in an area of the county where we don't get a lot of top quality athletic fields. So I think we want to also be clear that, it's an athletic field that we want. And if for some reason that is no longer feasible, then we should revert to some kind of combination of park and housing. But I do support the push for, or the goal here of reserving this property without housing for an athletic field supported by other park features, including the stormwater. So, that's just a comment I wanted to make. Now, I'll turn it back. Well, I'll turn to the Council Vice President to administer the order of council members.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President and Mr. Chair. Just wanted to give I know that wasn't a formal motion, but a second to Councilmember Reamer's idea that we would include language that would say if this doesn't turn out to be a soccer field, or it doesn't have to be a soccer field, could be some athletic field, but some sort of square rectangular field, that it would revert to housing. I did want to note, because it wasn't noted in here, I did bring some information to this session where we talked about, in addition to the fact that you could develop more than 150 units on this property and have a park that dealt with the stormwater management issue that SHA has said it was its primary concern, that I brought some data that within 2 miles there was somewhere between 6, and you remember this, Pam, there was somewhere between 6 and 12, I think it was 6 maybe. Yeah, I don't want to misstate. I think there were 6 parks, that several of which, schools and others, that had full athletic fields within, 0.6 to 2 miles, and that I thought there was already adequate service to this area in light of that, and that the housing was the more pressing need. I ended up, as the recommendation reflects, acquiescing and going along with my colleagues on this point, but I think it's important to note that that discussion was made and those numbers were put forward. But I would definitely agree, in light of where we are, that
I was planning to make a motion, but I would just let people talk a little
perfect.
bit first.
Yeah, so I agree with that. When the motion happens, I'll agree with it, and I think it's a good compromise, realizing that, you know, this is a very sought-after spot for a lot of things, being right there at the corner of, you know, 16th and Georgia. But I think we came to a decent agreement. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Friedson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you to my colleagues on the Fed Committee. I appreciate the fact that there's a recognition of the significant needs for athletic fields in this part of the county. We certainly had a significant discussion on this. I'm glad that we arrived at the correct answer with a 2-to-1 vote. I always appreciate. It was 3-0. We ultimately were 3-0. Although there were, after a significant and worthy discussion, an important discussion, I always appreciate when my colleagues have the courage and conviction to agree with me. But I have concerns about the proposal as it has been presented. That was a joke. Yeah. I do have concerns, though, with the proposal. I think that we share the same goal, that we want athletic fields here. I don't see that there is a risk that we not have athletic fields. We have the commitment from parks specifically and park and planning that the goal here is to do the athletic fields that everybody agrees are desperately needed. We got significant feedback from community members. There was a recent letter that came from David Cox with North Woodside Citizens Association, also endorsing and supporting this idea. I'm concerned that the caveat language weakens the language to actually pursue what we all agree is a desperate and dire need, not just for this specific community, but for the county. Athletic fields are a massive need for the county, particularly in the down county area. We do not get second chances at large swaths of land. I'm also further concerned about what this can mean for a land swap, where we are basically artificially increasing the value of the land that we're planning to swap, which seems like a pretty lousy negotiation tactic. And so I have real concerns about that. And if our goal is to have athletic fields at this site, if we are set up and already in discussions with State Highway, who owns the site, to do a land swap to make those athletic fields happen, if everybody is on the same page, I'm just not sure why we are snatching conflict from the jaws of consensus. So I hope that we move forward with the recommendation as was agreed 3-0 at the committee without any caveats. I won't be supporting the motion. While I respect my colleagues, and I'm hopeful that we can keep at the dais the committee recommendation as it was decided at the committee that pursues the significant need that we all agree we have.
Thank you. Councilmember Albornoz.
Thank you, Mr. President. Won't come as a surprise to my colleagues. I have a thought or two on athletic fields and soccer fields. So for a little bit of context, and I really want to commend the committee for your thoughtful deliberation on this issue. There is no question we have a massive supply and demand issue with regards to athletic fields in general. Just one athletic field can serve over 3,000 county residents when you factor in the families that come to watch and observe. And I really loved the images of the potential for this particular athletic field, and that it would include a park in addition to that, so that an entire family could be served. And these athletic fields aren't just important for recreation and leisure. They're critically important for placemaking. They provide gathering places within communities, particularly in communities that are as densely populated as this particular part of the county, that gives an opportunity for people to engage with neighbors and residents and that they don't come across in their everyday activities. And these particular athletic fields, when not being used by athletes, are often used by pets. And become informal dog parks too, which is sort of yet another gathering place that is important for county residents. We, in any week now, this council is going to get a report from the Office of Legislative Oversight on youth sports participation in Montgomery County and how disproportionately communities of color have access to quality athletic fields throughout the entire county. And some of that is because of the supply and demand issue. So this field will not just serve this community, which it most certainly will, but it will help offset some of the demand and use of other athletic fields around the area, which are heavily used. And so for all those reasons, I very much support the original committee's recommendation 3-0, and I don't want to water that down because I think that it holds firm to what we are trying to achieve, and I don't know that an amendment, while I appreciate and respect the need for us to think creatively of finding housing, I certainly agree with that, but because there's consensus on agreement that we want to pursue this as a park and a recreational amenity and a field, I don't see the need to support the additional amendment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Rice.
Well, thank you. And as a non-member of the Planning, Housing, Economic Development Committee, I'd love to hear from the Planning Department in terms of your thoughts as to the amendment, or proposed amendment, I should say.
Well, I guess as a general practice, we run into a lot of problems when we put things in master plans that try to be a little bit too prescriptive. I guess the best example is the Friendship Heights provision that says there has to be a grocery store in a specific location for 40 years, which has caused a lot of problems. Honestly, we're going to get this park. We're going to build an athletic field there, period, full stop. I think perhaps the way to go might be, just a suggestion, I hope you'll take this as constructive, language of the plan says this should be an athletic field. Passive uses at this park is not the rationale for this park, so don't even think about it. And that would give very strong direction to head off what Mr. Reamer had stated as his concern, which is once you've got a park, and we saw this, I'll just go ahead and say it, Four Corners, this happened, where once the park is acquired, suddenly the community says, oh, now that we got the park, we don't want it to be heavily used with an activating, presence like soccer. That happened. I think you could head that off by simply saying in the plan, we're acquiring this park for active recreation and an athletic field, and that's it. And then when there is a public process, which of course there always is in Montgomery County, many public processes, right? It's our leading export. If anybody who wants to suggest some alternative use will have to confront the master plan language that this body said, we're getting this park because we want a active physical activity and specifically an athletic field, and that really is the end of the discussion. Good. That's my thought for you.
So I think we should do that. So I hope that, Mr. Chair, that would be something that may address the concerns that you have and still protect what we know is incredibly important to us as a public resource. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councilmember Glass.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want a better picture of what this 3-acre park would look like. How many soccer fields, how many parking spaces, how many passive recreation benches, whatever it might be.
Page 81 of your plan, if you have that with you, there's a small drawing in the lower corner that's a rendering.
81, no.
I have,
and
I'll give it to you.
And while you're
Great, thank you.
While you're looking for that, we've studied this a little bit more carefully. I mean, obviously we haven't, gotten that far into trying to understand the site, but we have looked at it more carefully in light of the discussion that happened in the Fed committee. And the Parks Department has concluded that if we had the whole site, we can do a soccer field and possibly one other recreational amenity, perhaps a dog park. If you put housing on this site, you'd be lucky to get a small tot lot. I mean, it's really kind of an all or nothing proposition. We can get too hard, well, I don't want to rehash that discussion, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But the point is, if we have the whole site, we can get basically 1.5 big active recreational amenities. And the reason I mentioned dog parks and athletic fields is because they're both hard to locate. Athletic fields because they're large, and dog parks because you can't put them right next to somebody's house. So the reason that this is probably particularly well suited to a dog park as the additional amenity is because it's got some separation from the houses. And, this is something we've struggled with we need probably a half dozen more dog parks in the down county. And we've been studying every park site in the county for the last year plus and concluded that in Bethesda, for example, really there's only one or two in the entire southwest part of the county that are actually proximate to where lots of people live but aren't so close to somebody's window that they're going to be complaining about it, and you have a situation like happened with Chevy Chase recently. So I think that there's a great opportunity to do an athletic field, small parking lot, and hopefully a dog park, but definitely the athletic field.
And how small a parking lot? Because I don't see parking on this rendering at all.
We did another sketch, which I don't think is in the plan, and I think it was on the order of 20 parking spaces, but I could be wrong about that. It was at the Fed committee.
I appreciate the diagram on page 81. It's exactly what I was looking for. So for those who aren't looking at it, it's as you said, it's one soccer field and an additional amenity. So that is helpful. Regarding the conversation that you had at committee regarding Councilmember Jawando's proposal for housing, you had alluded to the land swap that would need to happen for this to become a park. And if it were to become housing, it would have to be a direct sale, fair market value. Do you have an estimate on what that fair market value?
We don't know what it would be.
Okay, that's fine. I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Remo.
Okay, good discussion. So,
well, wait. If you're going back to that, then we have two others here. So, Councilmember Jawando, did you?
No, I was on topic. I was staying on topic.
Okay, well, all right. Go ahead.
I mean, I don't know. I'm still on the topic, if that's what you're asking me.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm fine with what you explained there, Casey. You know, something that is really clear that this is for an athletic field and an additional feature. I just really want to say, like, I lived through what you just described, the North Four Corners Park, and council members voted against converting a, abandoned property that had been taken over by vegetation many times because the community around it rose up and, some people, I should say, in the community around it. Others really wanted it. But, and the council, Councilmember Navarro knows this very well. So it's not, it's possible that could happen. I just don't, I think it would be a real tragedy if we passed on this and didn't actually, build the athletic field. And I'm just trying to mitigate against that.
I'm in total agreement with you. And I should mention, some of you might not have seen the letter came in late last night from North Woodside supporting the athletic field. So
good.
You do have.
I didn't see that. I saw that they supported a park.
So the neighborhood, at least
that's
the neighborhood
great.
to the
That's
north,
exciting.
immediately abutted.
Well, that makes a big difference.
Is on the record saying they're for this. And
That's
since I
good.
live in the neighborhood immediately to the south, I can guarantee you that as long as I'm around,
you're going to dig the first shovel.
I will
and
be,
plant the first seed of grass.
Yeah.
All right. I think we can probably just move on. But
okay. Thank you, Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you, and I won't, take up the motion in the chair's stead. I think the agreement to change and say it should be a park is fine. I just want to note that I pulled up my notes from the thing. The other reason that I didn't mention that we should have, I think we still should, but consider this for housing, is that this is very close to a Purple Line spot as well. So it's like the definition of TOD. The 16th Street Woodside Purple Line spot is not too far from it. And the other issue was that you have Meadowbrook, which has a whole, Meadowbrook Park has about a ton of fields on it and all that. There were 6 areas that had fields nearby. And I just want to make sure that we understand that. And it would be a travesty, to your point, if we built this field, again, with a place that has 6 fields within 2 miles and is near a Purple Line spot, and we could get 150 units of housing or more, and if it turned out to not be a field. So I'm all for fields, and I know this area very well, but I just think, we need to think about that. You've got Argyle, you've got Rock Creek Forest, you've got Rosemary Hills, Littonsville right there. You've got a lot of parks. So anyway, just wanted to make sure people understood that.
Thank you. Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you. Of course, I can count the votes, and I
Absolutely.
understand that. I just want to make the point that, there are going to be instances where we're going to have to make policy decisions and weigh the benefits. And I understand the need for us to also incorporate these kind of amenities in that part of the county because we are really lacking. But to Councilmember Joanda's point, it's also another site that is close to Metro, with the Purple Line coming. We're kind of passing that, we're making that decision. So I just want to say that obviously as we get into these conversations, and I happen to be on the other side of another vote in this particular plan with these single-family homes, here we have this lot, we're making a different decision, and that's okay. But we're going to have to kind of figure out how we do this, piece by piece, because there's no doubt that this fits the definition of an opportunity for, public land for us to maximize housing. But again, I can read the tea leaves and know that this is obviously going to be also a very welcome amenity, so I'm not going to pull out my sword for this.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Hucker.
I just wanted to echo, I thought the chair said it very well. We're all very, very committed to housing. We've all said that. We voted that way. That doesn't mean you need an unlimited amount of housing in every possible space in the world. Right. And there are other priorities as well. And we have, as my colleague said here, with transit-oriented development, we believe in not just transit-oriented housing only. We need other amenities near transit as well. So I think this is a great outcome. I appreciate the letter from North Woodside. I want to be grateful to David and his whole crew for weighing in, and and I'm looking forward to the groundbreaking. So, well said. Thank you.
Well, and I think and thank you. I think the reality is that with transit, if you're only going to have parking spaces for 20 cars or whatever you're going to have, people are going to use transit to get to this park site. So it makes a lot of sense, and it's the site. And I'm assuming that you're going to have to realign 16th Street, and that still allows for that. So, okay. So we're moving on, I guess.
Moving on.
Okay. Go ahead.
Can we just revisit that? Aren't we doing something?
I guess we're not moving on.
Wait.
Go ahead. Tom.
Just since you raised the number of parking spaces, how flexible is that? And do we need all 20?
There's no facility design yet. That was a sketch that park staff did just to understand the fit. But we're talking about, you want to have minimal parking there to accommodate a soccer game, basically.
Yeah.
But it's mostly a walk-to neighborhood park, during the week.
And there's spaces in front of your house.
Right.
For example.
Exactly. I'll be walking there to watch somebody else's kids play soccer because mine are.
I think 20 is a minimum. Yeah.
There will be conversations about how much parking is needed for the soccer field. Right. So we'll point made.
We're not going to let it interfere with that recreational program.
Thank you. You'll figure it out. So the language says we're buying an urban gateway recreational park containing an athletic field at this site. So we mean what we say, and I think we're all in agreement. I think it's great that we're spending this much effort to talk about public land, because we do need to always devote ourselves to a really maximizing public land for our benefits, and in this case, we think that is an athletic field. The next property is the Silver Spring Health and Human Services building, where we definitely push the envelope from what you might have thought we would do in support of housing. So there is presently a building there, which candidly is not likely to go away anytime soon, but there is what was once a school is now being used as an HHS facility, and we zoned that to allow for a pretty substantial amount of housing with 60 feet, 75 feet, and CRT 2.0 with 0.5 commercial, 2.0 residential. So it's if in the event that the county can get out of that HHS site, then there's the opportunity there for some pretty substantial housing, which would help a lot. Anything to add there, Pam? All good?
Just that the committee didn't actually vote. That was the recommendation that the committee came to as a group, and then
That's right.
requested that planning bring to council some images of what that might look like. and I
Oh,
know
that's
that they're prepared.
right. That's right.
And we do have that information. We've done, again, you have to understand that it's a massing study.
Yeah.
It's not a detailed design.
An architect's
One could
plan.
accommodate the FAR in many, many different ways on the property, but there is an image, if you were to do lower scale, sort of almost townhouse-looking kind of units, liner units,
Yeah,
facing the
we're
community.
not
We're not
seeing it yet.
It's
Oh.
not up.
We have to figure out how to get it up on the screen. Yeah.
All right.
Here it is.
So again, this is just a massing study. It shows doing 35-foot tall residential units facing the single-family homes that are to the west. And on the east, where there's Georgia Avenue, it goes to 75 feet. It does have the required step down to 35 feet, which is a requirement of the zone, because the property, which is a church that's directly to the north, is still zoned as a single-family residential zone. So you still have to have a step. But it has some structured parking in the middle, and you could possibly end up doing surface parking, but if you were really maximizing the FAR, this is just an example of how it might end up looking. It's actually a pretty good location for this amount of height, given that you have a park to the south and a church to the north, so that it doesn't look overwhelming along that portion of the Georgia Avenue streetscape. And you would be able to do the lower height, more almost, again, townhouse liner units that would be compatible with the single-family homes that are directly to the west.
Okay, thank you. I mean, the bigger takeaway is this is county property. So what would actually happen here would be something that the county would have total control over. This is how you could theoretically use the density that is allocated. How it would actually be used is not something we're truly deciding at the moment. But this is kind of a version of it. And so my colleagues
We have some
that.
speakers.
All right.
Councilmember Friedson.
Oh, and can I just mention, it would go to about 184 units of housing.
Okay, Councilmember Friedson.
Thank you for that. Thank you for the planning staff for doing this rendering. I think this speaks exactly to what Councilmember Navarro was speaking to previously, and I almost said, wait till the next conversation, because we did exactly what you are talking about, and I think it speaks to precisely what we're doing and what the chair just mentioned, which is this is an aggressive zoning for this area, but the county maintains full control over what we do here, and so there'll be ample opportunity to ensure that it meets the needs that we have as a county, also reflects the nature of the community, and that it's a good neighbor as well. This is public land, and we should be aggressive on it. I think we got even more aggressive. This is one of the areas on the bus tour that I identified and we identified together of an area that seemed obvious for more. And in fact, I think that we missed an opportunity already with the building that's already been built there. And so unfortunately, we have to make up for that. And hopefully moving forward, we don't do that anymore, where we build buildings that are such low density, that have far too much parking, to the point earlier made by the district council member. So I appreciate you raising this. I don't think we actually, to staff's point, to Pam's point, we actually voted on it. I'd be very comfortable with it. Just wanted to reflect that, but I do think we'll need to take a vote, and I appreciate the fact that we were able to pursue this and balance the interests of the community to have an amenity that's transit accessible in the previous item, and then aggressively pursue the additional 184 units and the additional height and density and housing here on this public land.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you to my colleagues. And I think it's important to note that this was part of my memo, and we wanted to go to 137 units, but 184 is certainly better. And that was part of the overall discussion why we came to agreement as precarious as it was on the previous item at SHA site. And so I really appreciate my colleagues coming along on this and maximizing it. I just wanted to ask, your current rendering, does it, that assumes the total redevelopment of the HHS site, correct, of the health center, right, as well?
It does, but it includes the required 10% open space as something that could be adjacent to the current park and that could become, in essence, an expansion of the current Woodside Park. So it does, yes, show the, again, I just want to be clear, this is the HHS site on Georgia Avenue, just near the Central Business District.
Right.
We also had talked about another HHS site, the Dennis Avenue Health Center, and that's much farther north. And that we also looked at a possibility of keeping the health center building, but building some multifamily on the surface parking.
Sorry, to clarify, that's where we
Yes.
missed the opportunity.
Yes.
So I apologize.
I wonder why there's any confusion on this.
I misspoke. There's two
There are
HHS
two HHS
sites, but
sites.
we missed the opportunity there, and so we, I think, amply made up for it here. Hopefully, we don't miss out
But
again.
this is a complete redevelopment, removing the existing small building
Right.
that was a former
These things
school.
happen.
Got it. Yeah, no, that makes sense, and thank you for clarifying that. And I just wanted to make sure from staff and for my colleagues that this would also maintain the same proposed requirement that 30% MPDUs, 15% at 65, and 15% at 50 or below AMI. And so, which is, I think, I don't know, maybe we've done it before, but I'm really happy. Okay, we've not done it before. So I think that's a new thing that I'm glad that we've set that out, and hopefully we can continue that or even be more aggressive on the affordability. So thank you.
All right. Well, I want to make a note about that. That's going to require the county to put money into the building. I'm quite confident. So rather than getting a payment for the property, we would be partnering with a developer, and we would be paying them to develop here. So, you know, you can change the AMI. You can go down to 5% AMI. It just means the county has to have money to put into the development to make it realistic. I think that's worthwhile. We should probably do that here. So it's a good idea, you know, to do when we can. But I just really want to say, you know, it's important that if you think we're setting a precedent that all public land has to be developed at 15% MPDU and 15 additional percent at 50% AMI, you're also saying, I think, that the county is going to have to put cash into all these developments, and there's only so much cash that we have. So, you know, I think we did it here. I'm happy to do it in this plan. I'm not sure you could do this for all public property and actually have enough money to make that all work. So I think we should just be mindful of that and take it on a case-by-case basis.
And if I may add, I think, again, one of the reasons it makes sense in this plan is that you are in an area where the market might support that, because this is a very transit-oriented area, a very desirable area for residential development, both here and farther north near Forest Glen. I think if you had public lands in an area where the market was not as strong, it might be a challenge to achieve those levels.
And
So
we're
I
talking
think-
about stick-built, for example. So this is a more affordable type of construction. I mean, there's just a lot of ways which, okay.
It's just a lot of
Yeah.
factors, I think, as Councilmember Reamer is pointing out, and continues to need to be looked at sort of master plan by master plan. We are too big a county to do one size fits all. We need to look at it master plan by master plan.
And that concludes the land use recommendations.
Yep.
So we have the transportation recommendations next, and
We
I
have
think
some
we,
lights, yeah.
I think we could take these without objection.
Well, we have some lights, thank you.
thank
Councilmember
you.
Giwando.
Thank you. I just wanted to add, while we still have Director Wright, and I think to Councilman Reamer's point, that was why we made the calculation. This is a desirable area. The housing that is already there is very sought after. It's a great community, but in addition to the transportation things that we're going to discuss, I definitely think the market supports, as well as the size and number of units we're talking about, the potential in that case too. We're talking about hundreds of units in many of these cases. So while of course we have to take everything in context, I do think that this should serve as a sort of mini precedent where these market conditions exist, that we're going to use public land in this way. We approved this COG goal, which is a very ambitious goal, and so I'm glad that we agreed to this, and I think we should think about this in these contexts where public land is, and there are a lot of areas in the county where it is desirable to live, and it's very expensive to live, that I think would qualify in this for this type of zoning and requirements. So I appreciate the conversation and look forward to doing this more in the appropriate context in the future.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you. I do appreciate this proposal, and I think it's great that we are kind of methodically going through these opportunities with this lens. I mean, I think what Councilmember Friedson has alluded to with the healthcare center, the truth of the matter is that we were not necessarily looking at all of this through that lens. And this is great practice in many ways. I think it goes without saying that if this is something we're going to achieve, of course, design guidelines are going to be really important. It should be like a really cool looking building that it's attractive and makes everybody feel really good. So I just want to say that because I know that when folks are looking at something like this and they're like, oh, this is going to go right there in that particular lot, and they want to make sure that it's quite attractive and it's cool and hip and all of that. So just wanted to point that out. But otherwise, I think it's a great opportunity for us to leverage this public.
Thank you, Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you. Yeah, again, I was happy to support the 15 and 15 affordable requirements. In this context, I really have no idea whether I think that you could apply that generally or where or what. But I'm quite certain that it means that this development won't happen without more financial participation from the county. And I think that there's a limit to that. And I think you can say what you want there to be, but if the real world doesn't produce that, then you haven't achieved anything. You've just, said what you want things to be. And, we just have to keep that in mind. Not that, not that anybody knows the answer, but I think in this case, we haven't overdone it. I think that there's got to be enough HIF money to make this kind of thing work. How much more we could do that, we'll take that up as we go. All right, so moving on to the transportation.
Dr. Orland. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. We're on item 5C, Part 2, that packet. There are about 5 issues that the committee took up which differ from what the planning board recommended. Otherwise, they're in agreement. The first one has to do with the balance between land use and transportation, which we always look at. And what we're doing here is we're trying to figure out is the build out of the plan commensurate with the standards in the SSP for approving that development. Otherwise, the development in the plan won't be able to go forward. What the planning board's recommending is increasing the delay standard by 50%, going from 80 seconds per vehicle to 120 seconds per vehicle. That's an average. So that really means that sometimes you're going to have 3-minute delays at each of the intersections, particularly in the peak direction. It's quite a bit of congestion. The committees agreed that that was possible for at least most of this area if, in fact, it were created as a red policy area, metro station policy area, which elsewhere the standard is 120 seconds per vehicle. And that has the side consequence that the transportation impact tax in that area would be reduced by 60% compared to what it otherwise would be. We go from being an orange area to a red area. So that's the first committee recommendation. It would apply to all the intersections along Georgia Avenue from August Drive down to Seminary Road. It wouldn't apply to Dennis Avenue, which is beyond a half a mile to the north, and not 16th Street, which is more than a half mile to the south. But everything in between would be applied the 120-second per vehicle standard. And the SSP change could happen either as an amendment if the planning board wants to move it more quickly, or more likely, I think what would happen is it would be included in their recommendation for the next SSP, which will be before you this fall and acted upon by November. Should I just keep rolling here? Or, okay, just stop me when you want. Despite going to 120 seconds per vehicle, there's still 3 intersections that would fail unless more things are done to them. And on page 4, you see the results of a study that planning staff had with a consultant, and all the bulleted items on page 4 would have to be done to be able to meet the 120 second per vehicle standard at Forest Glen Road and George Avenue and Seminary Road, Columbia Boulevard, and George Avenue. And even at the 16th Street and George Avenue intersection, a few things would need to be done to get to the 80 second per vehicle. The plan also talks about, in fact recommends, what's called the short-term design alternative for the George Avenue Beltway interchange. And if you have your plan, if you look on page 23 of the plan, you'll see an aerial photo it's been altered to show what would happen there, which is essentially the southeast quadrant loop would be eliminated. And that movement, which is the eastbound to northbound movement, would be relocated to what is now the eastbound to southbound ramp. So you'd end up with an interchange which looks very much like the Connecticut Avenue Beltway interchange, if you're familiar with that. And what would that do is eliminate a major problem, particularly in the northbound direction, where there's considerable weaving that's happening between people who are going northbound and want to go west on the Beltway, and people going eastbound on the Beltway and want to go north on Georgia Avenue. They're crossing each other and causing massive backups, particularly in the evening peak. This would eliminate that. And then there's a couple of other options, which the long-term option, which is on the bottom of page 24 of the plan, which is basically called a divergent diamond interchange, which it's a little strange in terms of what we've seen here, but it basically moves the northbound traffic over to the west side of the road, the southbound traffic to the east side of the road. That operates better. And also, there's a proposal by the planning staff to have a special ramp for people going northbound to go west, similar to what's on Maryland 28 coming into 270 from the west. If you take that and you're trying to go southbound on the Beltway, there's a special ramp that takes you past the intersection with the off-ramp heading southbound. And so the reason why I'm mentioning all this is because despite the fact we have forecasts for delay at the 3 intersections I mentioned, particularly the 2 closest to the interchange at Forest Glen in Georgia and 16th Street, Seminary Road in Georgia, until we really have a design that State Highway has come up with that they're acceptant of in the longer term, we really don't know what the effects are going to be. So a way of basically fudging this, and that's really what this is, we're recommending language at the top of page 5, which says this: at the time of the sector plan's adoption, both the final design of the George Avenue Beltway interchange and its effect on vehicle delay, as well as the local area review standard to be used in the next SSP, are not known. You're going to be revisiting that potentially this fall, the SSP standard. Therefore, any intersection improvement that is needed to meet the congestion standard in the most current SSP, so it might be the next one, might be the one after, depending on when this comes up, is in conformance with the sector plan. So it basically says whatever works is okay with the plan. Such improvements must not deleteriously affect pedestrian safety, however. So that's language that's been added. And furthermore, the planning staff's recommended text to evaluate this northbound signal bypass ramp that I mentioned, which is similar to the Maryland 28 I-270 interchange, is something else that should be evaluated as part of the short-term design alternative. Okay. The next issue is one you heard a lot about, which is having to do with Woodland Drive. Woodland Drive is a road that parallels Georgia Avenue. It's a block east of Georgia. It's a secondary residential street. And currently, it runs north and south, but it terminates just south, by just south, 15, 20 feet south of, is that right? Yeah. 15 or 20 feet, just south of Medical Park Drive. The plan had recommend connecting that, basically closing that gap and having the straight connect. A lot of folks in the neighborhood nearby objected that. They're worried about cut-through traffic being caused by that. They're worried about the fact that you have St. John's Church on the west side of Woodland, and you have its school on the east side, and then kids going cross back and forth over a street that would be a through street if that connection were made. A lot of discussion about this. Some alternatives were put forward. Bottom line, the committee's recommendation is twofold. first of all, is to go ahead and make that connection. Make sure that the street continues, that part of the street continues as a secondary residential street, that it's not a primary residential street, so that it maintains the same safety measures, if you will, or possibilities that any secondary street would have, which is if speeding happens, then you can have speed humps on that street. If there is cut-through traffic that happens, you can have cut-through traffic restrictions on that street, both following processes which are well established in the county. But furthermore, the committee's recommendation is that there be a full signalized protected intersection at Medical Park Drive and Georgia Avenue. The idea being that development that occurs in the Medical Park complex or traffic really even coming from the east on Dennis Avenue that might want to get out into Georgia Avenue another way could use Medical Park Drive and get out there, and there won't be the incentive to use Woodland Drive, even if connected, as a cut-through street. There's a side recommendation here too that the committee recommended, which is the Medical Park Drive now is classified as a secondary residential street, but it's built to the same width and has the same function in real life as a primary residential street. And so the plan wants to recognize, the committee recommends recognizing that and reclassifying that as a primary residential street. So that's the next recommendation. The fourth one is, I think, a relatively minor thing. There is well, I'll call it for the sake of this part of the discussion, a kiss and ride facility, which is planned for the Forest Glen Medical Center property, just east of Georgia Avenue, north of Forest Glen Road. The plan actually mentions it as a drop-off area as opposed to kiss and ride. The problem with the words kiss and ride is it connotes that it'll be a WMATA kiss and ride, even though it's right next to the metro station. WMATA has certain standards for kiss and ride, and their standards may overcome the abilities of the site to be able to handle it. And so the compromise language is there at the bottom of page 7, which says, provide a safe and efficient pickup drop-off area completely contained on the site for transit users that is accessible from Woodland Drive. And then the planning director mentioned also this, which the committee recommended adding, which is the public benefit points in conjunction with an optional method regulatory application be awarded. DOT must approve the final detailed design at the time of the site plan. The applicant will only be eligible for public benefit points for the act of constructing the pickup drop-off area. No points awarded for the land contribution or payment towards the construction of the facility. DOT also wanted language similar to this in the transportation section of the plan so it doesn't get lost, and so that's that language on the bottom, page 7. The next item on top of page 8 has to do with access to the Forest Glen Metro Station that was requested by the Americana Finmark in the northwest quadrant of the intersection of Georgia Avenue and Forest Glen Road. Right now, the Forest Glen Passageway, the underpass, will run from the southwest quadrant, right basically where the metro station is, to the northeast quadrant. And at both ends, there will be an elevator. The Americana Finmark was looking for an elevator, furthermore, a third one, in the northwest corner or near the northwest corner. We looked at this, and the one right at the northwest corner will not work because it gets right in the middle of the vent shafts that are there for the metro station. And one that's further west on the north side of Georgia Avenue would actually be a longer walk than it would be to the already planned elevator in the southwest quadrant. And crossing Forest Glen Road is not, frankly, a big deal. The problem is crossing Georgia Avenue there. So the committee's recommendation is just add language which says the plan confirms and supports the funded project and recommends detailed consideration for the final design stage, which includes the location for an elevator on the south side of Forest Glen Road near the existing steps into the station lobby. And the final thing we looked at, and we always look at this too, is the master plans is public school adequacy. And the test here is there the probability that there will be enough public school capacity to house or to address the additional number of students that be generated by the development in that plan. When the analysis was done by the planning staff, they found that there would be about an 800 student shortfall at Einstein, the high school level. Einstein's the school which the kids in this area feed into. 179 student shortage at Sligo Middle School, and 116 students at the elementary school level, split between Singer and Woodland. At the high school level, as you know, both Woodward is going to reopen within 5 years, as well as Northwood. The additional capacity from both those schools should be more than enough to take care of Einstein's shortage for many, many, many years. The middle school situation, there is surplus capacity in the future, even at Newport Middle School. So if there were a boundary change between Newport Mill and Sligo, that would take care of much of, or actually most of this deficit. Furthermore, Montgomery Hills Middle School is in the vicinity as well. It houses a private school now, but eventually could be reclaimed by the county as a public school. And finally, if it came to its Sligo Middle School site, is large enough that it could accommodate a small addition. So amongst all those possibilities, don't see any reason to believe that there's going to be a problem at the middle school level. And finally, at the elementary school level, there are 4 schools within the vicinity of this plan, which are being used for other purposes now, but all could be reclaimed in the lifetime of this plan, or any of them could be reclaimed, I should say, not probably would be all of them. And so as a net result of all this is that the committee did not feel that, or felt that there was a balance between school capacity in the future and the development here. And just the last thing to note, the executive is always required to put out a fiscal impact statement for every plan, and that's included in the packet. And it's typically a large amount of money, but it's the kind of thing you will program as you find the ability to pay for it, and given priorities elsewhere in the county. So that concludes my report, unless you have any questions.
Thank you. Councilmember Albornoz.
Thank you, Mr. President. First question is for the committee. I really appreciate your guys' hard work here. If I could get a better understanding on what the committee's thinking was with Glenn's first point with regards to the time differential between the congested roads, and they're saying the potential loss of 60% of revenue, tax revenue. If I could just better understand what the committee, what the thinking was in objecting to the Planning Commission's recommendation on that specific issue.
I don't think it was really so much objecting, because the planning board wanted to go to 120 seconds per vehicle as well. This
Right.
provided a more direct rationale for doing that, as opposed to just saying, oh, we think it ought to just be 120 seconds per vehicle here. The advantage, it's true there's foregone revenue if the transportation impact tax is lowered. On the other hand, it's the glasses half full part of it is it incentivizes development that much more in these areas, because you've reduced the tax burden, at least on that tax, by 60%.
And I think it's important to mention, this is, I think, if I'm not mistaken, the only metro station on the red line that is not a red policy area, that is still an orange policy area. And I think it's recognizing, is that correct?
There's actually 2 more, but they're not very likely. One is Medical Center, which is mostly within the Federal Preserve, and you're not going to have any effect there anyway, except for maybe the north side of the Bethesda area, which is already within Bethesda. And the other, I need to say this, is Tacoma Park. The Tacoma Park Metro Station, although it's in the district, is cheek by jowl to the county, and there's a lot of Tacoma Park, which is within a half mile of that station, but there's nothing in the zoning or the planning for Tacoma Park that would seem to warrant going to that step. That's
So-
it. Everything else is, you're right.
Yeah, I think in Forest Glen, this plan really is talking about thinking of Forest Glen as a TOD neighborhood, a little different than maybe the way it was thought of previously. And that was, I think, part of the rationale of saying if it is, it should be a red policy area, like most of our other TOD metro station neighborhoods.
Thank you. That's really helpful. That's the context that I needed. On point 3 regarding the cut through, I'm very familiar with that community, and my grandparents actually lived off of Dennis Avenue, so I lived in that community, and we went to St. John's Church growing up, so I'm very familiar with St. John's, and can attest to there are a lot of kids that go to that particular school, so I certainly understood, and I know my colleagues did as well. As a result, you gave some very thoughtful recommendations on how to mitigate the potential traffic that would come through. But if you could just elaborate, the plan as recommended calls for the possibility or makes it easier for there to be speed bumps and other traffic mitigation methods. Is that accurate, or is that something we can require if the road does in fact go through?
There is a process for citizens to apply for speed humps. The DOT does a speed study and a traffic study to see if it warrants doing it under that program. On the other hand, and I don't think this has been done, but the council could include a CIP project which affirmatively does put speed humps on a certain block. And you could do that. I mean, again, it's not been done, but you can. Nothing's holding you back from that as essentially a preemptive move if the road is connected.
But I think the good thing about on a plan level is that because it's being classified as a secondary residential street, then any of those options are possible, whether you do it preemptively at some point with a CIP or whether you wait and have someone request it.
Right.
But if it had been a business district street categorization, you could not have had speed bumps. And I think what the committee did was change it to a secondary residential category, which allows for those.
I have to tell you, I believe you'd have as much controversy, as much people who are weighing in on not having it cut through as you would with speed humps. Both cause a lot of excitement for the neighborhoods. So they might end up with both, but the public really should have a right to give their thoughts.
Okay, thanks.
Councilmember Reamer.
Thanks. One point I wanted to make on that issue is that at either end of this road, there are properties that limit the cut-through traffic. It dead ends on both ends essentially. So, it's not like this is an alternative to get from Wheaton to Silver Spring. The amount of vehicles that will, use this as a cut-through, I think, is fairly limited. And we definitely can make improvements in, for example, I know that students do go between the church and the school. Why could we should have a crossing that is the very best that we can do in terms of visibility and those bollards and everything. I mean, it ought to be a place that continues to respect that historic use, and I think that's achievable. But I know there are also many residents who feel like opening this up will be a real improvement for them, and it's a tough one because you've got property owners here, the school and the church, that have been allowed to essentially use a road as a driveway, and that provides value to them, and we totally respect that. But I think we feel like the bigger need at this point is to reopen that, and so we will work closely with them to ensure that this happens in a manner that is most respectful. One thing I just wanted to say, as was mentioned earlier, the remaking of the fixing of Georgia Avenue is kind of the major transportation element of this plan in a lot of ways, but it is a state project. But everything that we want to have happen from a transportation, the big transportation issues are on Georgia Avenue. If you haven't had a chance to sit down with Katie Mansorini, with the transportation team at planning, I really encourage you to do that. There's just a lot going on there, and maybe we'll be able to make something happen here soon. There's some talk about incremental strategies that I think are very, very intriguing. I think that really concludes their committee wrap-up. I want to thank Leslie Howerton and Katie and Gwen and Lisa and Casey and Robert and everybody. And Pam, thank you, and Glenn, thank you so much. Really appreciate everyone's great work here.
Thank you. Did you want to? No? Okay, so where do we go from here? Do we need anything else at this moment?
Well, we're going to be working with planning staff to prepare a resolution which would incorporate all your work session decisions.
Okay.
And that'll come back to you a couple, 3 weeks for final action.
Very good. Everything else? With that, thank you all very, very much for all of your hard work. We are adjourned.